Hello, I wanted to talk about a request from some clients. I wanted to speak about fear and anxiety, and my cat is in the way, and how fear and anxiety is basically lies that we tell ourselves, a form of self-deception, and also that deception gets passed along to others. Additionally, I wanted to include in this talk the example of perfectionism that has taken over so many people's lives, and sometimes without them even knowing that's what's going on with themselves. This urging from within that requires somebody to be perfect, to do perfect, to create perfect, to fulfill perfect, to be perfect in other people's eyes. And that is a great source of anxiety for people, because we, as I've said in other videos, as a group of creatures, human beings, we fight with our egos to attain a level of power and control. Our egos want to achieve that. And depending on how we were raised, and what the communities are that we've been involved in, and the familial messaging that we've received in terms of the shoulds of how we should be, what we should be doing, how we should be achieving, the accolades, the identity that we need to have, that we're told we need to have in order to have value in our lives. And it's another form of addiction. We are addicted to compliments. We are addicted to rewards, to trophies, to that little hit, that little high that we get when somebody tells us how lovely we look, or what a good job we did, or oh my gosh, wow, you did that. Whatever the accomplishment is, the brain gets a little hit from that positive reinforcement, and therefore we are conditioned by that, and then we want more and more and more and more. So this happens, maybe through some sincere parenting, and our parents are urging us to do our best. Nothing wrong with that. But sometimes, depending on a person's nature, they might have a tendency for them to take that further. And then they take that do your best message and turn it into a something, an urgency inside themselves. Otherwise, their experience of themselves is, I'm not good enough. I'm not enough. I didn't do enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not beautiful or handsome enough. I am not talented enough. I'm not enough. And unfortunately, not only does that message sometimes happen in our families, and accidentally or intentionally, who knows, but it is very much intentional in our society, in our collective consciousness. And so many of us, and you'll see the rates of anxiety and then depression. Sometimes anxiety causes depression, and sometimes depression causes anxiety. But what I'm seeing is that anxiety is so rampant in our society for so many reasons. One is, particularly in our country, we are experiencing a lot more trauma, collective trauma, And so that creates anxiety. That feeds into the need to try to have control. And so we want to then, at least control my little bubble, my little world, my people in it, and how people perceive me and receive me, and a sense of belonging that every human being yearns for. So it becomes an obsessive compulsive tendency. And for some of us, we're very aware that it's going on. We have this running tape, or several running tapes in our heads about what we got to do, about what's the next thing, what do I got to do, how am I going to do this, how am I going to please this person, whether it's in a personal relationship or a professional relationship or a school relationship or in some community that we belong to. How am I going to belong? And society is constantly, social media, all forms of media are constantly sending out messages. Entertainment is sending out messages about how we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to do in order to be accepted and belong. And unfortunately, the problem is we are so very disconnected from ourselves and very disconnected from each other, because the world has gotten smaller but also way too big. And we're it's smaller in that we're able to have instant information about any part of the world that we want, and instant connection with anybody in any part of the world that we want. But we also it's small in that way, and big in that we are being inundated by so much, and there's an overwhelm of mental, emotional, and physical sensations that are constantly coming at us. So that's the bigness of our world. And this is causing some pretty significant anxiety disorders for people. I'm not a big fan of saying disorder, because in my opinion, we all experience fear, and it's always there, and it's actually a mechanism in our brain in the efforts to keep us safe. And so that's why, unless we learn how to manage our brain and separate ourselves from our brain in the running tapes in our head that tell us, danger, danger, alert, someone's judging me, I'm not good enough, this is not a safe situation, I'm physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually in danger. That's what the brain is always looking out for, because its main purpose is to keep us safe. But unfortunately, it's like putting a 1-year-old in charge of that and their perception of what is safe, right? And they don't know. Our brains don't know. So it is our job to become the controller of our brain, to control our thoughts and our emotions, to challenge the thoughts and emotions that we have. Because just because we think it doesn't mean it's so. Our brain is often a liar. So the title of this talk could be Anxiety and Fear is a Liar and a Thief. It takes away a connection with my true self, capital S, my true self, and it causes me to be reliant on my ego self, which is uninformed, ignorant, oftentimes delusional in our thinking. And that's not to be insulting or offensive. That's what we have to recognize. A brain that is untrained, this is what's going on. And this is why these mental health issues keep rising up, because we haven't trained our brains yet. We haven't become the master of our mind yet. And we're not putting the effort in. We're out in the world doing, getting, And what is driving us is fear. That is what drives that fear, and everything falls under this umbrella of fear. Even if I'm being driven by greed falls under fear. Greed is like, I'm not going to get any, right? I'm afraid I'm not going to get any. If selfishness, another form of greed, but there's other ways selfishness show up, in terms of maybe selfishness in our relationships and wanting people to understand us, but not being able to extend the same understanding to them. That's driven by fear. That's driven by anxiety. The fear of not belonging, the fear of being abandoned, the fear of not being good enough, the fear that I'm bad. This is all being driven by the brain, the untrained brain, the ego, okay? So just to kind of go back and touch and bring perfectionism into it, right? So, we have all these measurements of personality there. A lot of people, will identify as a type A personality, and a type A personality is known to be pretty perfectionistic and high energy, and maybe a little, wound tight perhaps, and things have to be in a certain way. So that's one way that perfectionism will show up. Overachievers, go, do, looking for that next hit so that they can feed the brain, like, see, I'm okay. See, I'm good enough. See, I'm doing it. Not acknowledging that there is such a disconnect inside, and that hole is never going to get filled up with enough compliments, enough money, enough accolades, enough power, enough beauty. None of it is going to fill people up. People become, receive the highest level of a degree. They're still not going to be done until they learn to connect with themselves and to face the fears that are stealing from the truth of who they are. So that's thievery, stealing. Yoga calls that the practice of asteya, non-stealing. So not letting our anxiety and our fear steal from us. Okay. And lying. We tell ourselves so many lies when we stand in a room, in a situation, and our ego is just shooting off assessments of the pecking order of who is what and what is where and where do I fit into that. That's all lies. We're all the same. It doesn't matter the skin, the hair, the body, the money, the wallet, the house, we're all human. And therefore, we all belong. We are all made of the same essence. Dare I say, the essence of God. We were all made in the same way, with the same purpose, to self-realize. The way in which we live our life, the profession that we choose, the activities that we do, all of that is just kind of the classrooms in which we are working at our process of self-realization. And in order to self-realize, which will eventually calm down the anxiety and fear, is through connection with ourselves. We must take the time to be connected to ourselves, noticing the brain, observing the brain, not giving it too much attention or influence, but just connecting as an observer, as a witness. But then there's another part of us that we must connect to, and that is the part that sits very deep within. And it's the part in me that looks and sounds and feels like the same as what is inside of you, as in what is inside of Joe Schmo, what is inside of everything and everyone. The same essence is inside everyone. You can call that soul. You can call that God. You can call that whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's the same. And so we're trapped in this world of material world. We're trapped in these classrooms of, trying to acquire things and achieve things and do things. And, we have to live in this world, and we have to have means to, take care of ourselves. And so, the way society, handles that is like we create like a life path, and this is what we do, and this is how we do it. And then, you're a kid, and you be a kid, and then, of course you're going to school and you're preparing for life. And then, you're supposed to go ahead and find a way to take care of yourself and a family if you choose to have one. And so that's the path. But the purpose of all of that is to use all of that to practice connection, a true and deep connection with ourselves. And if we're out there just doing and and just in the planning, and we're not connecting, that's when we are victim to lies and fear and stealing from ourselves. And so I just also wanted to comment on perfectionism. Doesn't always show up like as described before as like a type A personality overachiever. Perfectionism also shows up as paralysis, right? People who basically feel the same fear that drives an overachiever sometimes shuts down a person from being able to do anything, because they're so flooded with that same fear that they're not going to do it right. And they may not even be aware that that's what's stopping them from taking the next step. But it's the same thing. It's, the flip side of the coin. Fear is the driving force for an overachiever, as well as it is the driving force, as if you will, somebody who's paralyzed and feels like they can't get out of their own way. We're afraid. The answer is faith. Faith can only happen with a connection with our true self, our higher self, our divine self. 12 Steps calls it our higher power. You can call it your guru. You can call it God. We have to be still, and we have to be silent, and we have to learn how to connect with ourselves. We have to learn how to separate, detach from the emotions, because many of us, and unfortunately this is sometimes reinforced in the therapy world, it is important to feel our emotions, but to use them more as teachers rather than as truth speakers. Our emotions are not necessarily telling the truth, especially fear. So first we have to get familiar with, how does fear feel in my body? Because sometimes, if you're like me, I would deny that I was afraid. I didn't think I was a fearful person. I didn't see myself as having anxiety. Oh my gosh. But when I finally saw it and got honest with myself, and the way I did was because I would be so irritated by someone else's fear or anxiety. I'll call it anxiety. And just the need to control, the need to have things a certain way. And I would get so irritated because I was feeling like I was being controlled by that person, and it was so uncomfortable, and it was so debilitating, and it kind of robbed the joy. Anxiety and fear is a thief and a liar. It gives you the illusion that you're going to be safe. That's a lie. It gives you, and it takes your energy. It takes the space in your mind. and it takes your creative abilities and it takes away connection. It is divisive. So when I recognized that, I was so irritated. I would get angry and frustrated by this person's fear and anxiety because it was directly affecting my life. I learned to this little tool of, okay, well, why am I so triggered by that? I am triggered by that for some reason. And what I learned is anytime I am triggered by something, it's because it's something that I've disowned in myself. So I learned, oh my gosh, I'm really triggered by fear and anxiety. How am I fearful and anxious? How does it show up in me? It shows up neon lights. When a trigger shows up for me in my life, it's in neon lights, so I can't miss it. So I can be irritated and be called to say, okay, if you're getting frustrated with that, you're being triggered by that, it's because it's something in you that you need to look at. You need to own it. Forget about that person. That's their stuff. No judgments anywhere, because again, we're all the same and we all have these untrained brains. So I had to look at that, and I had to see, and I saw, oh my gosh, I'm so fear driven. I'm so fearful. When I get angry, it's because I'm afraid. And why would I get angry? Because I wasn't getting what I wanted. Because I was afraid, somebody or something or myself was not safe. And so I tried to control things. I didn't know I was doing it. I was blind to it. I was ignorant. And I really believed that I was doing it from a place of righteousness and sincerity and love. But what I had to get honest with is like, wow, this fear and anxiety is running my life. It's controlling me, and it is creating disconnection with myself. And I always claimed to be a very faithful person, but actually my actions and my being controlled by my emotions demonstrated that I wasn't as faithful as I thought. I didn't have that inner trust and that inner connection with God, and that everything would be okay, and with my value system that I claim to honor. So those of us, most of us are dealing with this perfectionism, and it shows up in each of us in various ways. So I would ask you to just have a look at that and look at the fear, and if you are a person of some kind of faith, that this is the invitation then to enrich, enhance, and study your faith in a more active and intentional way. While being aware of the mind and finding out perhaps practices in your own spiritual path. Mine is yoga, and the 12 steps is something that I used to be more involved in. Now it's yoga. They both go really well together, so I refer to the 12 steps very often. But we cannot overcome this without connecting with ourselves and having devotional practices to be connected and to continue to evolve, grow, heal, and raise our awareness and our consciousness. So I hope this was helpful, at least to get you started in having an honest look at how fear and anxiety and perfectionism are playing out in your life. And if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out either in the comments below, or you can check me out on my website, insightswellnesscenter.com. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for listening.